So one of the things that kind of immediately stood out to me at the beginning of the show. So I don't think the actor Daniel Henney, who plays Lan, is a bad actor or he's miscast, but his appearance doesn't conform to the Lan mentioned in the books. So I'm all for taking artistic licenses and stuff, but like, do you have to like make him look so ethnically samurai? Do you know what I mean?
I'm
Like
gonna just say
Lan,
it. I'm gonna just say, why the fuck does he look like a samurai? It just doesn't.
yeah,
It just doesn't. It doesn't fit. Like I think I asked you this after we watched the
yeah,
first episode. I'm like, what the fuck is this samurai guy doing in the middle of this fantasy show
yeah.
that doesn't seem like it's from feudal Japan?
Exactly. Well, and the thing is, like, I think they took the books a little bit too literally at times in the wrong places because, like, they have very skilled blades, and I think the author Robert Jordan was trying to talk about the swords in this book as sort of like a a, a, not like an extension of the samurai swords that you have in Japan, which are known for their craftsmanship and their, like their ability in combat and stuff. So he was trying to describe a similar sword, but like the showrunners just literally took that to mean a samurai because he does describe it very closely. And yes, it could sound like a samurai, but I'm like, come on, man, use a bit of imagination. Like, how does something from like something that's in the real world historically make sense in this sort of like fantasy
He he
world? Do you know what I
just
mean?
he just seems like he's time traveling. He just
Basically,
showed out of out
because
of out of nowhere.
he's got the top knot, his armor is very samurai, and I'm just like, read the books. Lan is a, you know, like for like copy of the Aragorn character in Lord of the Rings. And I'm like, Lan in the books is not shown to be. He doesn't have a top knot. He has a braid on his forehead that holds his hair back, and it's disheveled a little bit. Like he's stone faced and stuff. And I guess like I could see Daniel Henney's character of Lan interpreted differently, but the whole samurai thing, you're absolutely right. Like it threw me for a loop, and I was actually relieved when you asked me this because I was like, oh, okay, so it's not just me who thinks this looks out of place.
Yeah, and don't get us wrong. I love samurai. I'd love to see a show about samurai, etc. Right?
Mm,
That's I'm very interested in that
yeah,
aspect of history,
so
but like it
interested
doesn't
that
fit
some
here.
so interested that somebody's actually currently working his way through Sekiro Shadows Die Twice on the console.
Yeah, damn
Just
straight.
just to let you guys know.
It's a
But
tough
yeah,
game.
mate, like I'd love to see. I love all that any movie about like feudal Japan. I even watched like that really hard to watch movie with Liam Neeson and Andrew Garfield about I think it was the Jesuit priest or something in feudal Japan. Oh,
Yeah, that's a tough watch.
that's a really tough watch, mate. Like, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's something that we're not exposed to a lot. Like, The Last Samurai was a great movie. I thought the Liam Neeson and Andrew Garfield movie about the Jesuit priest was pretty good too. Just a different take, just like a non-typical way of like showing, or just it's not something we're used to seeing very often, unless you're like exclusively watching historical Japanese movies. So it's good to see, and you're absolutely right. Like he looks totally samurai typecast, and it's to his
Yeah.
detriment because like he's already of Asian origin, even though you might not be able to tell by his name. But like you're
I mean,
trying to play
the
this.
actor is right,
The
not
actor
the
is. That's right.
character
That's
necessarily.
right.
Um,
No, the actor is of Asian, I think Korean descent,
yeah,
but he's American. But at the same time, I think sometimes Hollywood, not sometimes, but often Hollywood gets this wrong where they try to be so diverse and try to show you, oh my God, it's not just for white actors, everybody's welcome. They go so far that they just they just end up like shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, where like you don't want to stereotype an actor or an actress of certain descent, but the needles line up at exactly the wrong place, and then you suddenly here you have like a typecast job because you have an actor of Asian descent cast as or playing what looks like a samurai character, you know. So you're like, okay, so you're trying to be so different that you end up going back to the same place. So
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way this kind of logically makes sense to me. Is like, okay, they got an actor who's of Asian descent, so let's make him into a samurai.
yeah, right.
That's the only
If you
way.
weren't, yeah,
uh, I'm reading into it. I don't know. I didn't see. I haven't looked into, casting or whatever.
yeah,
Or done any
yeah,
of that research. It just seems like that because otherwise it doesn't really fit.
yep.
And yeah, I think let's just preface this by saying we got no problem with diversity. I think that
No,
should,
I mean, of course, Matt. It's
because people
2022.
can misinterpret whatever, right? So let's just preface this by saying I think whatever diversity is good, we should have that,
Yeah,
as long as it makes sense for the material that you're showing. And a lot of the times, Hollywood is just trying to be so like politically correct that they've gone
yeah,
overboard,
yeah.
and it doesn't fit anymore, and it like hits you in the face,
Yeah,
right?
where you're like, oh, you're trying way too hard to make this ethnically diverse, and it doesn't quite make sense in this context. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And in fact, let's just say in fantasy, you can take more
Liberties.
liberties
Yeah.
because it's fantasy. Somebody came up with it, right? It's not. It
Hmm.
doesn't need to be necessarily historically accurate. But like Hollywood has also done this with movies that are supposed to depict some part of history,
Hmm.
and it just doesn't work. It sits out like a sore thumb.
Can you give us a couple of examples where recently you maybe might have observed this, like taking too many liberties with historical casting? Like I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head, and I have
Well,
noticed I just kind of like I just shake my head at it, and I'm like, bloody
you're
Hollywood,
putting me
you
on the
know.
spot.
Uh,
I think they made one. What's that? What's that show called? Okay, the one I do remember is Call of Duty, which is not a movie, but like the recent Call of Duty, was it Vanguard? I think you told me about this,
oh, the video game. Yeah,
the
yeah,
video
yeah.
game, where they have, they're not showing the Nazi symbols.
Well,
Um,
a lot of World War II video games are doing this now, where it's like considered offensive apparently or some reason. Like I think Battlefield 5 did it, and I was just like, what? Like that's historical fact. So so what they do is they show all the Nazi regalia, the banners and stuff, but they don't have the swastika on it. So they just have the Iron Cross, and that's meant to represent Nazis. And the logic behind it, I remember reading it somewhere on Reddit or something, because I was kind of noticing that. I was like, well, none of these officers are wearing regalia which have the swastika on it, just has the Iron Cross. And somebody was mentioning, oh, it's because they don't want to promote anti Semitism or something. And it's apparently illegal in Germany to
yeah, I know it's
outside
illegal in
games.
Germany, but
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
don't need to do it in the rest of the world.
I think that's just going too far, mate, because like you're covering up the horrors of history then by covering up that symbol. Like, how's that promoting anti-Semitism? Like, so you're afraid people are going to use that as a gateway into racism? Like, is that the only gateway into racism? Or
I hate to break it to people. People are going to do that
oh,
anyway. If you have predilections in that direction, you're going to do it anyway. This is not going to stop you. And like,
and it's a game, for God's sake. So like
it, yeah,
they're showing like tits and they're showing like naked people in games these days and stuff, and it's very adult. But like a
yeah. I
symbol
mean
is
that,
supposedly
that's a good
taboo.
point.
Come
Like you're
on,
treating people like children. Like
basically.
I hate to break it to these showrunners or these, you know,
Game designers,
game
yeah.
designers. The Nazis existed. They were abrasive and upfront about, showing off their symbol. They
Hmm.
had it on everything, their flags, their uniforms, right?
Yeah,
It existed. They did horrible
it
things.
was a
They were a thing.
brand, mate. It was a massive. There was like it was basically brand marketing in a way. Don't have any ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know that it's historical fact. So that kind of pissed me off. Like not having that. Like not that not that like I'm like, oh, I want to see more, Nazi history or something. But it's it's part
No,
of
we're
something
we're
people need to understand and
we're
know
just looking
about.
to be historically accurate. It
That's right.
existed. We're not looking for you to put it on things that didn't have it,
Yeah,
right? Okay, okay, that would be
that would be
going.
fucked up, mate.
Yeah, that would
Yeah,
be fucked up. But like the Nazi Germany existed. They went about doing the horrible things that they did,
yeah,
and you're making a game about that. So what the hell? Just be historically accurate. The other thing that
yeah.
this game also got wrong is, let's call out, the U.S. had segregated battalions, right?
Yes.
Right, which they're not also showing. Which, I mean, this is, I guess, taboo to talk about or whatever, but that existed in 1940s. It was, the U.S. had a lot of racism, and they had segregated battalions. There were black only battalions, and they didn't
Yeah.
mix with the white battalions.
Yeah, and they also, I think, had native soldiers that stayed separate from the white soldiers and stuff, like in war. So this is like well-known historical facts, mate. Like, but your point about Call of Duty Vanguard is that they're not showing any Nazi regalia, just as Battlefield did. Now, I'm not sure if this has been changed, but like last I heard, like they're also omitting Nazi symbols and stuff from the game. And what's the other thing you were mentioning about Call of Duty Vanguard um, about diversity and
Yeah, the
taking too much
battalions.
liberty? Yeah.
I mean, just you wouldn't have mixed race battalions. So that was the, or
Mhm.
soldiers walking around. That just didn't happen.
Yeah.
I wish it did, but it didn't. So like, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
The other thing, okay, going away from enough
Yeah.
of shitting on Call of Duty. Um, yeah, what I was going to mention is, I was talking about a TV show. I think Troy. There was like a recent Troy adaptation that had Achilles played by a black actor.
Oh,
I guess that,
is this a Netflix Troy?
yeah, the Netflix
Oh,
one.
okay, okay. I haven't
So it's
watched that,
supposed to
mate.
be
Yeah.
like a. It just wouldn't. Again, it's kind of Troy. You can argue is kind of mythological, although recently I think there's been some sort of historical historians have found that Troy might have existed as a real city.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure about that, but
Yeah, I think,
nonetheless,
yeah.
I don't think you know people of African descent were in that part of the world when Troy
Right.
was happening, to my knowledge. Right, and Achilles, etc., are mythological characters from, what is it, Greek mythology,
Yeah.
right?
The Iliad, yeah.
The Iliad, and people from African descent wouldn't have been depicted in Greek mythology, so it kind of doesn't make sense there. Am
Huh.
I wrong there?
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that in some movies too. Like, I think it was The Outlaw King, the movie with Chris Pine and Florence Pugh that I was watching, where I realized um, we had there was a couple of scenes where they had like black people in Scotland during the time of William Wallace and Robert the Bruce, and it kind of like I I I was kind of like, was that ever a thing at the time? Maybe a slave or two, but like walking about freely and stuff. I don't know about that, mate. Like, I have to look at some. Maybe our listeners who might know a little about history could help us out in narrowing this down. But like, it just seems kind of odd and out of place for African people or people of non-local descent in Scotland at the time of William Wallace to be out and about. I don't know,
Yeah,
just
I
the
mean,
feeling I got.
yeah, from the perspective I'm coming at it from
Right.
is, let's try to be historically accurate
Yeah.
whenever we can,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's really the only perspective. That's my only gripe. And then, yeah, if somebody can show us that, hey, we're totally wrong here, and
Hmm.
black people were out and about in historical
In the
Scotland,
UK, yeah.
in the
Well, the
UK,
UK, well,
yeah,
yeah,
then hey, I'll come out
Scotland
here and
and
say I'm
stuff at the
wrong.
time.
Like,
Yeah.
totally. I have nothing against
But I mean,
being wrong here.
let me just say this as well. Like, it didn't feel out of place in that movie. It's just something that was there in the marketplace. I think it was in Outlaw King. There's a scene early in the movie where they show the decapitated head of William Wallace being put in the square, and you notice a couple of actors, and you're like, huh, did they have people of African heritage in Scotland at the time? I don't know. So it is something that stands out to me as well. And this is just like our whole little diatribe, little tangent point about not being able to like taking too much liberties with diversity in your TV shows or your historical retellings of tales where it doesn't apply. So not
Yeah,
all the shows get it right.
yeah. I think this show in particular got it wrong. They
Yeah,
were trying
that's something I
extra
felt.
hard. I felt like they spent more time on this than on the actual story itself.
Yeah, because like I had no problems with the casting, the main cast or otherwise, but then I felt like on certain places it was kind of jarring to see like that level of diversity where like like in Game of Thrones you have this really interesting, very subtle way of doing this where, the northerners or people in the north, they're mostly white and they'll have a few colored people strewn in there, same as Iron Islanders. And as you start going a little bit south, so King's Landing and Dorne, you start getting a little bit more ethnic. And Dothraki are generally, darker skinned people, and they're different ethnicity. And so white faces stand out amongst the Dothraki. And so, kind of like, it works in that context. And I know, like, it's not always spot on. For example, in Dorne, you have the Sand Sisters being played by three actresses. One's white, one's Asian, and British, and then one's a Kiwi. But for the look of it, they do look like they could be sisters. So that's good casting in my opinion. Whereas like in Wheel of Time, sometimes I felt like when, for example, they went to Shinar in like the last couple of seasons. I think it's Shinar. I can't remember the last fortress before the Frontier and the Blight. Um, yeah, it's like a whole mix of things going on, and you're like, wait, what? Because the king is very Asian looking. I think it is an Asian actor, and then his sister is an Asian act portrayed by an Asian actress and stuff, and then all the all the soldiers are like super mixed. So you've got a brown guy, you've got a white guy, and I'm just like, is like what's going on? Like I'm confused as to what this region is supposed to represent. So sometimes my point is you can point to regions by just describing a general ethnicity, which makes sense. And I also like to say, like, for example, people might say, okay, maybe Star Wars does the same thing. How does that work? That's space. So that works in that context because you have intergalactic travel and stuff. So there's more chance of mixing and melanging around in Star Wars. It makes sense over there in a planetary intergalactic advanced time concept, but like in this time, I don't know, mate.
And then going back to Game of Thrones, did you mention King's Landing? Like also King's
Oh yeah,
Landing was a place where they did was a good example where mixing different
yeah,
ethnicities really made sense because it's a big
yeah,
city where people from all different regions are coming and intermingling. That really worked.
yeah,
That was a good example of showing diversity.
yeah. It's kind of like the financial capital of Game of Thrones, right? Like it's the most powerful city, I believe, in Westeros. It's where the king lives, so it makes
Yeah.
sense that more people would come there to seek fortune, and so you have a nice balance of diversity and stuff. But yeah, just
So
something that kind of also did make sense about Game of Thrones. Sorry, about Wheel of Time.
yeah, the one thing. Okay, so the one thing I'll say about this, and really what turned me off is I want to watch fantasy shows
Yeah.
to kind of put me into this other world, take me out of my current reality, this whatever shitty reality we live in sometimes, and take me
Mm-hmm.
into this other world, right? This new concept or reality or area that somebody has thought of.
Yeah.
But then if you start to put in, concepts and cultures and um, you know, mentions from our current reality, and you bring them into this fantasy world, then that throws me off. Then that I'm not getting that otherworldly experience anymore because I'm seeing examples here and there of the real world coming into play, influencing this other world. And I'll give you one
Mm.
example where I really kind of hit me is that
Okay.
there was this one scene where we saw a bunch of Aes Sedai, and I think one of them was wearing a headscarf. And then
Oh
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah. The red, one of the red Aes Sedai, the red
so
Aja. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I got nothing against headscarves. I don't really care about it. Like I'm agnostic about
Hmm.
it. But the thing is, that's a cultural slash religious symbol of the real world, and you're
Right.
bringing that into this fantasy world, and that totally takes me out of this fantasy world,
Hmm.
right? Because it's not a symbol
Yeah.
from
Okay.
this fantasy world. It's a symbol from the real world, right? And
Yeah. No,
I feel
that's
the same way if somebody was wearing a cross or somebody had a turban on, or
yeah.
think of whatever else, real world symbol that clearly stands out.
Well, I mean, they didn't do it with turbans or stuff, right? Like, they didn't do it with anything else. It was just specifically a woman in a face
Yeah, you
cloth,
know what I'm
which,
saying is if
yeah,
it's not really about the headscarf
or
per
headscarf.
se,
Sorry,
it's about
yes.
any sort of real world symbol. If somebody had a cross on, I would be like, why does somebody is Christianity a thing in this world? Like,
Yeah.
why does this person have his cross? Because supposed to be a fantasy world, not have symbols from the real world.
Yeah, I mean, and so I'll give them props. Like the Aes Sedai, so women who can channel the one power, which is like the big central theme. The one power is sort of like the Force from Star Wars. You can do various things with it. It empowers you, and so they have women, especially, who come to the White Tower to train in this, how to control the Force. And so, in that context, the diverse structure of the Aes Sedai, like, school, I would say, or the White Tower as they call it, again, very Lord of the Rings here, that makes sense. I'm okay with that. But, like, I think historically, if you look at it, like, things were very regional back in the day, so, like, there wasn't a lot of outsider mingling, or if it was pretty down low, I would imagine. Do you know what I mean? Like, people were
Yeah.
protective, way more protective back then.
Well, it was just harder to travel, right?
That's it, mate.
That's the main
That's another
reason.
thing. Yeah. Like, journeys were very hazardous, right? You
Yeah.
had so much wildlife and disease and distances and weather, all these factors contributed to less long distance travel. It's not as easy as we have it today, so. But let's move on and get into a little bit of the bigger differences, that were kind of obvious in the show from the books. So we alluded to one of the big points at the beginning is, Perrin's wife, and Lan sort of being cast a little bit differently than he is in the books, which, you know it's okay, but, like, maybe don't cast the Asian actor as a samurai looking fella.